Hey friends, welcome back to the Bald Booktuber. I have several wonderful people today. We're talking A Feast for Crows. This will be full spoilers, so if you have not read the book yet, be very careful. We welcome any kind of audience participation. I will try to keep up with the comments, so please let us know if you have questions and so forth. But I have with us today Joanna. Hey, Joanna.
Hey there.
I have Joana Sousa. Hey.
Hello.
And Alex, the tall guy, the 12-foot friend of ours. Excellent.
Hello. Hello down there.
Yes. Yes. Good. So I chose this particular book because I like the underdog. And this tends to be the most hated of the books, which I don't really understand because I love it. Hey, Madison, what's up? Good to see you. Next week, I will be joined by Madison, Mike, Ben from Bingus Con, and Kyle from Kyle Reads for an additional discussion. But today, let's get into it. So I guess we'll start with your impressions of the book, first time or multiple time reading. Let's start there, I guess. And we'll start with, I guess, Alex and go clockwise for me. So Alex and then Joanna and then Joanna.
Yeah. So this is my second time reading this book. The first time I read it was when I first read the series. So that was whenever the show first aired. So it was 2011, 2012, something like that. That's when I first read the series. That's the first time I read this book. And I didn't remember pretty much anything about it except the general split, like whose POVs we got and some major scenes in this book. But so going into this was like kind of a new read for the first time again. And I really enjoyed it. I will say that it is very different than Storm Swords and everything that comes before it. So I totally see why people struggle with this book.
Sure.
Especially on the first time through. I never felt that on my second time through. I remember feeling a little bit more jarred on the first time I read it, but this time it was kind of just soaking it all in. And I actually really appreciated the kind of slowdown of pace and kind of the big events that we got. We got a lot more introspection with some of the main characters that we're seeing that this book focuses around. And I just think some of the events of the previous book were just so like cataclysmic almost for the world that we almost needed something like you needed this. And if this was combined with A Dance with Dragons in one book, it would have been an epic book, I'm sure. But I think the split in some ways really helps this. It feels a little bit more kind of zoomed in and different. It helps it stand out. And I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I loved my time reading this book. I was just telling Scott before we went live that I read this in May, I think. Yeah. And so it feels like it's been a little bit since I finished it, but it's I had a great time with it.
Awesome. Joanna?
Okay, cool. So this was my first time reading it, actually. And I didn't know what to expect. I know, as you said, it's the underdog. Nobody likes it. And I mean, it's really tough following up A Storm of Swords. It's the best book that has ever been written, in my opinion. So yeah, it's hard to follow up Storm of Swords. But I loved getting Cersei's POV in this one. That was John, I still need to watch your video, but I just loved it. She's so freaking clever, and just the way she thinks, and you see her manipulating people and just pretend to be like, oh yes, and all this, and then she's like, ugh, in her head, I love her so much, which I never thought I would say that I would love Cersei Lannister, but yeah. And I loved, as you said, it feels more focused, and it feels like you get to delve more into the characters, as well, the ones that we have in this book at least. And I think you guys know Dany is my favorite, so I really miss seeing her in this book. So I was like, oh, no Dany chapters, but makes me excited to go for dance now. But I also loved seeing Dorne in this book, as my only vision of Dorne has been the show, and the show butchered Dorne quite a bit. So I really liked this book a lot. And I was telling Scott and Alex before going live that I feel like I took so long to read this book, not because of the book, but because of my personal life, how it's been, that it feels a bit hazy. But I just know that every time I was just so happy, as always, with these books. So
beautiful.
Yay. So as for me, this was, like Alex, my second time reading the book, and the first time being the first time I read the series. And I remember distinctly, I've already said this a million times, sorry, I'm a broken record player at this point, but even when I read the books the first time, I never had the concept of ranking them, honestly. I just loved every book. It didn't matter. And I can honestly say, like, same thing. I loved my experience reading this book. I adored this book. I remember distinctly from my first reading experience just how powerful Cersei's point of views were. And that was the same thing for me this time. I just feel like her voice in my head is so loud. In her inner dialogue, just amazing. But something else that I really appreciate about the book, of course, like what Joanna said, that we get to see more parts of the world, including Dorne. And I enjoyed I just enjoyed the different settings in this one, the way the world opens up. But also, one thing that was pointed out to me on the Ben and Eve podcast is
Mhm.
that this particular book, if you look at the chapter breakdown, people get upset because you do get a lot more of the side characters in this particular book and not so much of the focused characters that we've had so far, like Tyrion, for example,
Mhm.
or Jon Snow. But if you look at the breakdown of chapters, one thing that's really interesting that Matt pointed out to me is that the majority of chapters are female POV.
Hmm.
That this is a
Mm.
very strong female
That's
POV
true.
book. And I
Yep.
feel like without him having pointed that out to me, I was actually surprised how many feminist themes came out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I noticed it too.
cool. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I don't think this book gets enough love. I think it's amazing. I think it's a masterpiece. And I totally agree with Alex too. I think with all of the climaxes we got in A Storm of Swords, we needed something like this. It wouldn't have worked, I think, to try to do the same thing. So I appreciated the different approach and I loved it. And like Joanna, I also took my time. I found that certain days I was reading the book much more heavily than other days, and it just needed spaces sometimes for
Yeah,
processing.
I agree.
But I loved it.
Yeah.
Nice. This was my third or fourth time. I don't know for sure. I read it on release day because I was caught up at that point. I started reading the series in 2000 or 2001, somewhere in there. So I've loved it every time that I have read it. I did it immersively this time with John Lee's narration, which is actually hard to find because they went back and re-recorded it with Roy Dotrice, who is not anyone's favorite, including mine. But the John Lee,
I got so used to him now.
How'd you find the John Lee one?
I bought it when it released.
That's
Back in 2005. So that's why it's
way to
hard
do it.
Yeah. So for me, I really like the Iron Isle stuff, all of the stuff with the Kingsmoot and all that stuff. It's some of my favorites. And I also really, really like the confrontation between Jamie and Brendan Blackfish. I think that scene is probably one of my favorite things in the whole series. Yeah. So we'll get more into specifics, but yeah, I love this book. With respect to Rogue's comment here, yes, that is correct. Daniel Abraham was a big part, him and Ty Franck both, the two members that wrote The Expanse. They worked very closely with George. I think part of the reason George is struggling so much is that they're both writing their own books and not there to help him. And I also have maintained forever that Daniel Abraham is the only person on earth that can finish the story besides George, for this reason and others. So very, very cool. Zen says publisher would have told him it couldn't release. Correct. Yes, it was too big. The way that it was chopped is strange. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. Usually a part 1 and part 2 would be different than what he did. So what do everybody think about the way it was split up?
It is interesting. I mean, I think I've read a couple fantasy books specifically over last year that had the same issue, where they went to the publisher and then it was split. And it's usually split chronologically. So they just take the book, cut it in half, and then those are 2 books, maybe like refine some edges. And this one is split like location and POV based. And so I enjoyed it knowing that what is to come. And I know that we have, the other side of this timeline with A Dance with Dragons. So I enjoy it. But again, like I said, I totally see why people would have been frustrated when this first came out. And you're just like, I missed. They keep talking about Dany, but I want to see a Dany POV, for example.
Yeah.
Like,
how long was there between Feast and Dance?
5 years.
6 years.
Oh,
yeah, five
See,
years.
that's so long. Yeah.
I
It's
guess
long.
yeah, that's understandable when you put it that way.
Yeah. If you're so excited
Yeah.
to see these characters again, how much was between Storm and Feast, you know? And then you're excited to see Dany and Jon and everyone. You're like, I have to wait another 6 years. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, we
it's,
didn't know how long it would be.
Yeah.
yeah.
We didn't know if it was the following year or 5 years or 10 years or whatever. So
Yeah.
Right.
And it's tricky because in the afterword
Mhm.
of this book, like literally straight up, he's like, this book sucked to write. Like this was so hard to do. And hopefully Dance is right around the corner, and just reading that, you're just like, well, at least we have it now. And now we're on the other side of that. So
correct.
I actually think it's a very interesting split, and I think it is really well executed.
Mhm.
But it's very different. So
Yeah.
I could see when people struggle with it.
Yeah, there's some really cool ways about the split. You can intermingle the reading orders and stuff like that. There's
Mhm.
various
Yeah.
orders where you can read them concurrently, and there are scenes in Dance that are sort of counterpoint scenes to Feast, which is super cool. Where you'll have one POV character talking to another, and you'll get one of those characters in Feast and the other one talking from their point of view in Dance.
Oh.
So
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I've heard that before too, that you can kind of, there are specific ways to rearrange the way you read it.
Mm.
It's interesting.
it's what I was planning to do this time because I've never done that reading order, but it wouldn't have worked out with the way we're doing the read along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I tried to.
time.
I looked it up to try to find it, and I was just like, wow, it's so specific. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like
Yeah.
read these 2 chapters, go back, skip this chapter of Feast. It's like
Oh wow.
it's not even like jumping back and forth the whole way through. It's like jumping back and forth, but also jumping back and forth within the same book,
Within the same
because
book, yeah.
the different POVs within the same, like A Feast for Crows by itself, are taking place at different.
Mhm.
They're like ahead of each other or behind each other.
Mhm.
So it would be very interesting to read it like that. I'm sure you would get a lot out of it.
Fascinating.
Someday. All right. Well, let's talk. I guess either favorite characters, or do we have any new characters we've been introduced to? Either new point of view or just new in general that we haven't seen before that anyone wants to discuss specifically. Go ahead, Joanna. You're bobbing.
Yeah,
Go
go
with
ahead.
Cersei.
Let's start
Let's
with
go.
Oh, I thought you were talking to Joanna.
No, you
Sorry.
made the Cersei video. I'm pretty sure it was you.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
go for
I
it.
was going to say Cersei for
Joanna.
sure.
Let's start
Cersei
with
for the win. I just, even the first time I read the series, I lived for her chapters, and I still did. And yeah, I mean,
She's
if you saw
amazing.
my video, it wasn't just clickbait, the thumbnail for that. But yeah, I almost wore my Cersei wig.
Wish
for
you
this
would
I
have.
was gonna say you
And
should have
Looking
worn
forward
it.
to
Yeah.
it.
I can go get it. I'll go
Yeah,
get it.
please do.
You all talk on.
We wait. I think something I loved about Cersei is how obsessed she is with that prophecy. Because we
Mhm.
see so many characters be obsessed with prophecy.
Yep.
And it's the only thing she thinks about is getting rid of Tyrion so that she can get rid of the Valonqar prophecy.
Right.
And it's so insane. And also with Marjorie, how she's always like, if I kill Marjorie, if I get rid of her, then there is no younger queen that will steal my spot and stuff. And it's just so interesting how her brain works. And she never even thinks that the Valonqar could be Jamie. She's just
Right.
obsessed with Tyrion. So
Yeah, she's pretty set in her ways and
Yeah.
her beliefs, and there's nothing that anyone is going to say that's going to change that, and
Yeah.
she holds true to it. Like and I think one of my favorite parts about Feast actually is before Jamie leaves to go to Blackfish and stuff, the counterbalance between those two POVs with each other, seeing like similar scenes or reactions from similar scenes with both those characters in it, and getting both of their POVs
Mhm.
was really interesting, because you see Jamie commenting on how Cersei is acting, and then you dive right into like Cersei's head.
is
And
this
you're
the
just
first time we had a Jamie POV?
No,
that's
Storm.
Storm.
No, right. Okay. Because I
Yeah.
love his chapters in this book.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
love
they're so
following, right? And the way he
Mhm.
thinks, and you can tell how in some moments, I mean,
I can't get it to look right.
yes. Okay,
It's
that's
a lot of
perfect.
work.
Good to have you, Cersei. It's very nice to see you.
I'll wear my Dany wig for dance if you want.
Very good.
I can't do it, you guys. It's hot.
That's all right. Sorry, Joanna, you were saying?
Sorry.
Oh no, I
go
was just
ahead.
saying how much I love Jamie's
Mhm.
chapters now. Yeah, how he you see him thinking about Brienne. I was gonna say Brian because
Yeah.
of the book of
Brienne.
Brienne a lot. So yeah, I love
Wait,
that.
you see who talking about Brienne?
Jamie, when he thinks about Brienne a lot, he's kind of in his mind. He thinks about Cersei, and then he thinks about Brienne, like, and how she's so different from Cersei. And
Yeah.
I just love that so much. I just really like Jamie in this book a lot.
So, you know what I found so fun? And I think, gosh, what I love about the Jamie perspectives and the Brienne perspectives in this, Brienne was also just a standout character.
Yes.
Absolutely
Mhm.
adore Brienne. And it's
Yeah.
so fascinating to compare Brienne to Cersei, by the way,
Mm.
for numerous reasons, including how they try to assert control over their situations in totally different ways.
Hmm.
But one thing that I really thought was interesting is that when I was in Brienne's perspective, it was just so cute because she's going through Westeros and it's so obvious that she's crushing over Jamie. Like
Mhm.
just the way she's like, and there was the place where Jamie and I were trying to get away from the people who were shooting arrows at us. And this was the place where we were wrestling each other. And, you know, every single thing is like almost romanticized when
Yeah.
when you read about it in a sort of storms. That was so far from romantic.
Mhm.
But just the way she's thinking about it, and Sir
Yeah.
Jamie, when he did this and when he did that. And so the whole time I'm reading her perspective, I'm like, wow, she is pining over him. And then when I read his perspective, he would now and then talk about her, but I was like, I don't know that he feels the same way she does until the scene where he makes the whole call her Brienne the Beauty, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that section. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it goes both ways after all.
And I loved the scene where Cersei writes it, like gets that letter to him, and then someone gives it to him, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to reply?" And he's like, "No,"
Oh, he's
throws it
no.
away. It's like,
Yeah.
"Burn, bitch!" Like, bye.
It's like she
yes,
could deal.
finally.
Cersei burned a lot of bridges in this book. And I would also say, in terms of a leader kind of consolidating their power and stuff, not a very good job by Cersei. She surrounded herself with a bunch of idiots. And
Yeah.
yes, man,
Oh, the
couldn't help
council.
her.
Goodness.
The smallest
Just
of small councils you could ever
Totally
imagine.
dysfunctional.
just
Jeez.
horrible. And really a big part of her downfall because no one was there to tell her, hey, don't arm the Faith Militant. That's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Don't do this, don't do that. And she's got no one to challenge her, and so she keeps making just bad decision after bad decision.
You can see
which is
that
fun to
she's
watch.
so- Yeah, you can tell she's so isolated. She's isolated herself so much from Tommen at this point, you know, where
Mhm.
he's just always like, don't touch Marjorie, don't do this, don't do that, and don't say this about her. And
Right.
she's like everyone that she could count on, Tywin and Jamie and her kids, they're all not there to be with her. And so yeah, I thought it was fascinating how she used to be like, power is power, look at me, and now she's kind of like, yeah. You can see her struggle.
Tywin's absence, I think, is
Yes.
felt very largely in this
Oh,
book. Whether or not it's like pointed out, you can just feel like, even though Cersei knows, or she thinks that she knows what to do, and she's right, and no one's going to confront her and tell her no. You can see just the scatterbrain reaction of kind of what to do, what should we do going on in her head, and then also in everyone else that's in King's Landing. And it's just, you don't have that force that, while Tywin was never, the king, he very much had a major say in what was going on at that level of power in there.
Yeah.
And
You know,
Jamie also thinks about
It's
it.
interesting because I did
Mhm.
come to her defense a little bit in my video,
Mhm.
as far as that's concerned, because I do think like growing up without a mother and then being surrounded just by men and being a Lannister comes with a sense of entitlement all
Sure.
on its own. But when
It's
you
true.
see how men are entitled in a different way than women are, and how
Mm.
she experiences that double standard of like when she's dressed up in armor as Jamie when she's young, and how people treat her differently. But the other question I have is, as clever as she thinks she is, um, it's like, I mean, we obviously know as readers, she's not nearly as clever as she thinks she is. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I was just, as I said this in the video, but I wonder how many opportunities she had to learn that skill.
Not
Like,
many.
because I don't think Tywin confided her to the same degree he did in Tyrion.
Nope.
And
Yeah.
those kinds of things, you learn a lot. Actually, even just throughout the story we learn things like winning a battle isn't the same thing as winning a war. We learn that there's, that numbers don't equal winning a war or winning a battle. It's about the discipline of your men. I mean, there's a lot of tactics and strategies and study that goes into being successful in any sort of situation. And I wonder if she, one, ever got opportunities to learn these things, and two, she might have been too haughty to consider that she needed to learn. But I also think about, like, back to the prologue, there was that scene where they talk about the glass candles, and I know that comes up at the end as well. And they talk about how the glass candle from Valeria, I wrote this down, that the glass candle was to represent that wouldn't burn, that it's obsidian, obviously, but that it's to represent truth and learning. And it's sharp to remind us that knowledge can be dangerous. And I feel like it's just, these are lessons she's not learning, and she's not opening herself to learning. And so she's just experiencing all types of repercussions from that.
For sure. Yeah, it's fun being inside her head. It's a little disorienting, but it's fun to be inside of there. And I think really she doesn't understand the value of allies. She doesn't understand what it means, what it would mean to have Highgarden on her side. All she sees is giving up power to them instead of understanding what she needs in order to keep and maintain the power balance where it is. So I think all that stuff is really pretty fascinating. We brought up Brienne earlier, and I really do like her chapters. I think probably on my first read, those were the biggest struggle for me, if I had a struggle. They seem a little slow at times, but what I really like about those is all of the interspersed lore that we did and all of the history. And for those of you that have read Fire and Blood, there's a ton of stuff in there that is referenced again. Kristen Cole.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that was there. If you haven't read Fire and Blood, please do, because it's fantastic. So
every time they mentioned that, I was like, really? Of all the amazing people, we talk about Kristen Cole. Okay.
Kingmaker. Yeah.
Kingmaker.
He is referenced briefly in Storm of Swords as well, but there's a bit more
and
here.
Sir Eric and Sir Arik as well.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things like that I was noticing, that I was trying to, I was wondering too. I'm like, should I be paying attention to this for Fire and Blood? So many little side stories that were mentioned. But I love the way that George R.R. Martin does that, because sometimes he just gives you just enough that it feels like a real thing, but without going overboard into over explaining it either.
Yeah.
Like, I was even noticing, reviewing the prologue this morning, like how there, or maybe it's a different section, I don't know, where somebody talks about the Great Doom. This was 1,000 years. Oh yeah, it's about the glass candles again. 1,000 years before the Doom. And I'm like, what's the Doom?
We know so very little about it.
But it's not explained, But it's enough to feel like, oh, that really happened. Because of course the characters aren't going to sit there and explain what happened.
Yeah. That's what I love about this world. It just feels so real. Because like you said, nobody's talking about the Doom, but everyone knows the Doom. And it just feels so lived in. And that's why I think it's my favorite series of all time. Well, I mean, the characters I love, but I just love how much this world, and sometimes you forget it's fantasy until you're like, oh yeah, right, there's dragons and there's shadow babies and stuff, but it's just so real, and there's so much history, so much lore, and they talk a lot about old kings and stuff, and you're like, oh wow, I wish I knew more about these guys,
Yeah, it's like you're watching a glimpse of a certain couple of year period in this history, when you could probably take the same amount of time in any single part of this history in this world and be just as dramatic and just as stressful and chaotic as well. So
that's why I'm a huge fan of Dunk and Egg and of Fire and Blood, and it's why Fire and Blood 2 I'm looking forward to almost as much as Winds of Winter. Not quite, almost as much.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I will be reading Fire and Blood for the first time after.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
Well, some people don't like it because of the way that it's written. I happen to love the way that it's written.
Oh, me too.
Because it's not a straightforward through narrative. It's here 3 or 4 different people said 3 or 4 different things, and the truth is probably in there somewhere, maybe.
Yeah.
Which I like, because that's how written it is. So that's good. Hey, Raph, how's it going?
Yay, Raph, you agree.
I'm excited when
down
Raph
the
says
whole
anything nice about A Song of Ice and Fire. Usually it's not nice. So
Really?
I don't
Oh, I'm just glad. I'm glad we agree, Raph.
This book was really
I
good.
Scott, I agree. I think the first time I read this, Brienne's chapters were the biggest struggle for me. This time I enjoyed them significantly more. Honestly, my biggest struggle this time was the Iron Island stuff. And I don't know if that's just me, but for me, yeah, I don't know. It's really good. I just felt like there are a couple moments where I was just like, okay, I'm feeling it was just a little bit tougher for me to get there, and I just wanted to get back to like Jamie and Cersei and I don't just how I felt during this one moment when I was reading.
I think I love it so much because I love reading about power vacuums, and I think that George does it better than anybody. And we sort of know or believe that we know that Asha was the intended heir.
Yep.
But that's not how things work there. And that kind of goes back to what Joanna was saying about this being very feminist focused. And is anyone going to support her claim? Well, I guess Roderick the Reader does, her uncle, but there's not a whole lot beyond that.
Yeah. Not enough, nearly.
But the problem is Victarion is the younger brother, and he's just sort of the take orders guy. And so he's not really the answer, and Euron is just a psychopath. So, I love all that stuff. I think it's all fantastic.
Talk about one of my the biggest colossal negative changes that they made for the show is character.
Oh,
Euron. Oh my
God.
Euron. Yeah.
He's
so much. What?
Oh, I was just gonna say I just don't remember anymore because I haven't watched those seasons since they.
It was terrible.
No need.
It was a joke.
We wanted Euron, and we got Captain Jack Sparrow. That's
he was Jack Sparrow basically.
Wow.
It was not well done. Not well done at all.
And this is the first time I actually, because I'd heard, right, because I'd watched a lot of videos where I know what happens in Feast and Dance, but seeing that he has this dragon binding horn, I'm actually nervous now. Now that I've seen it, I'm like, how about no? So
yeah, and is making claims that they have been to the shadow beyond a shy and these places that human beings are not supposed to be able to survive. So all that stuff is inherently cool and also just deeply unsettling. And I like it.
I'm a bit scared, honestly. And then Victarion is like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get Dany for myself." I'm like, "Well, I don't think so." Euron is scary. Euron is very scary.
Zin is correct. Simon Vance is exceptional always and was tremendous for Fire and Blood.
Amazing. Yeah.
I love Simon Vance.
And what's his name? Harry Lloyd? Is that his name?
Harry Lloyd.
Harry Lloyd. That's the
Duncan Egg. He was the character that played the series in the show. And I won't spoil it. He played somebody else on too.
What do you guys think of like the faith militant stuff? Because I feel like religion's always brought up in this series, like a lot, a huge part of this world, and just all the different religions and gods and people's beliefs in them and how they conflict with each other and how the truth might be a combination of a whole bunch of things instead of just the fire goddess or whoever everyone's worshiping. And then you have the faith militant, who is this other, now they're armed, extremely powerful force and presence in King's Landing and has a huge negative effect on that area. I just thought it was, I don't know. I love that George brings that into the story because it's just not like Cersei. You're not really thinking that as a threat especially on the first time through. Right. And then it starts creeping up and you're just like, there's something really wrong here. And these people have way more, their intentions are not as clear cut and good as you may think.
I was freaking out on reread when she gave them power and she felt so clever about it. Just oh my goodness. But yeah, I totally, it's just crazy. And especially as poor little Tommen, he's just standing with the seal, not even knowing what he's doing.
Oh,
goodness.
Yeah. You can tell he's a child, You're like, oh. Yeah.
There's a reason that children should not be kings and queens. It's very, very, very obvious that this is not a good situation. So, I think it's very cool, and I love how George ties it back to history and what a big problem it was for the Targaryens. All of that is amazing. And ironically, it's going to lead to, and does lead a bit to, Cersei's downfall, the decision that she made, which I love to see it. So I think all that stuff is fantastic. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. And especially the land soul parts. My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that brings me to one of my favorite side characters, Sir Kevin, Lancel's dad. I love Sir Kevin in this book because he knows what's going on with the twins. He knows everything. He would be a perfect hand. Like, he could actually set some things in stability, I think, but he doesn't want it, and he refuses to help Cersei. And I love all that stuff. And he's making all these snide remarks. And it's all perfect.
He's awesome,
I love when he's on the page. It's good stuff.
I love all the Lannisters, I think. Like, I also loved Glenna and
Jenna. Yeah,
or is it Jenna? I'm sorry. Yes,
That's
I
right.
loved her scenes so much. She was amazing.
Yeah, Jenna is wonderful. It's kind of like Tywin with a sense of humor, which is just incredibly hard to understand, but I love it.
Yes.
Joanna, you were getting awake when we were mentioning this. We were mentioning about Cersei and so we're talking about the Lannisters. We're talking a bit about the prophecy and how obsessed she is with it. And something I thought was super gruesome is her getting all these dwarves killed. I mean, accepting all these dwarves being killed. And it just reminded me, because I just rewatched this episode in season 2 when Joffrey gets all of Robert's bastards killed. And you just see that same cruelty in Cersei of being so freaking obsessed with killing Tyrion that these things are happening and she doesn't care. She doesn't bat an eye, so. And her obsession with the prophecy. We talked about that a little bit. So if you wanted to say something about it, I don't know.
Oh, about the prophecy specifically?
Yeah, about how she's obsessed with the Maggie the Frog and with Marjorie and the Young Queen and stuff. Yeah.
It's almost it almost feels like a self-fulfilled prophecy in some ways,
Yeah, definitely.
It's crazy too. Slightly unrelated to the prophecy, but maybe related, is what you were saying before we went live about how often it's mentioned that she has green eyes, reminding you of Wildfire, and how she has the whole Tower of the Hand burned. And and I think, doesn't Jamie make a point at one point? He's like, "You're acting a lot like Targaryen."
Aerys
Targaryen, yeah.
Aerys Targaryen. And one thing I thought was interesting about that, I don't know. I wonder now I don't know if I've heard the right conspiracy theories or if I'm getting mixed up. But I know that, like, one thing I think is interesting, though, is if we just look at that and think about how with the Targaryens in particular, there's this idea that madness is genetic and it's passed down. And I don't know, like, obviously Cersei is crazy, but maybe it's not genetic with her. I don't know, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And how that could, I think it adds a little bit, another layer of interest and complexity if it's not always, things aren't always genetic. Just like the way Cersei is like, telling Sansa she's the daughter of a traitor, like being a traitor is in your blood. So I like the idea that it's not always that simple.
Yeah. And then you see Mr. Aemon, who's just like the sweetest man, and he is a Targaryen, and he's not like that. And so,
Is anybody else sad that we never saw Maester Aemon and Dany on the same page at the same time?
Oh, yes.
It broke my heart.
Wouldn't that have been the best scene ever?
It made me so sad when he was like, I should be there with her. I should be there. And I was like, yes.
His passages when he was passing away, they got to me so much. They're so good.
Yeah. I love Mr. Aemon.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of tunnel vision in a way when it comes to a family like the Lannisters.
Sure.
When you're raised in an environment that sees everything in a very specific type of way, and you only get this one philosophy from your father, which is like the only real living parent for most of her as she's growing up. It definitely creates, and she has all the power that they have. It definitely creates a worldview that is very specific, and so she may not even be able to understand anything outside of that. Like, she will never even be able to. Same with and I think Jamie for the longest time probably was the same way until life circumstances kind of put him in positions that were like, whoa, okay, there's that were actually challenging who he was fundamentally. And Cersei's just never really had that, and she's always been this kind of, there's nothing been there to shake up who she is on a core level outside of just making it more stronger and stronger and stronger, because everything that happens to her or everything that happens to her family and her son, and it all comes down to like her family being attacked and they don't deserve it and all this stuff, and it's just kind of snowballs into this.
She hasn't been taught humility by losing a hand or having anything, like that happen to her.
Yeah.
Not being a dwarf.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. So it's interesting to me. In this world, obviously, these ruling families all have the belief that small folk are nothing and worthless and just vessels or whatever. But Cersei cranks it up to like 20. Like it is way, way beyond the pale with her.
Well, I have a couple of things to say about that, because I think, like, one thing that you're saying, Scott, it reminds me of what Littlefinger tells Sansa. He tells her that one of Cersei's biggest mistakes is that she underestimates the most humble players can have a role in affecting the game. And I loved that line. I loved all those scenes, by the way. But the other thing too is that even though we could say that's the case, and there's certainly that influence, I do think that being a Lannister, that it's very easy to feel very entitled on the one hand, and you see it in all three of them. I think even Tyrion to some degree, but at the same time, I think it's still, he shows human nature in a little bit more complexity than that too. Like that kids are not the direct representation of their parents either, because obviously Jamie and Cersei are different. And I mean, of course, there are different situations, different worldviews. Yeah. But even look at like Tommen and Myrcella. They're very different from one another. And they're very different than Joffrey. And even among the Stark children, they're all very different from one another despite coming from the same parents. Now, can you see some threads, some, yes, you can. But I do think, I appreciate that it's not so one for one. Like, you're the daughter of this person, you're going to act like that, Yep.
Yeah.
Nope, I think that is good. We mentioned Dorne a bit earlier. Maybe we can talk a little bit about Arianne as a character and about her plan and what we think of her plan to crown Myrcella and how that worked out for everybody.
So I'll just say really quickly that every time I don't remember her in the show. Was she in the show?
Yeah. I think I know the actress's name, but I don't remember it right off the top of my head.
Because I don't remember her at all. So in my head, she looked like, probably because of the name similarity, I kept on picturing her as Ariana Grande. She was Ariana Grande in my head.
Amazing.
Maybe a little bit older, yeah.
Maybe a little older, but like a little more voluptuous, but
good stuff.
I think in those chapters, in the Dorne chapters, you get a lot of that feminist stuff that you were talking about, Joanna. Because when they're like, why shouldn't Myrcella be the queen? Why? She's older than Tommen. Why is Tommen sitting on the Iron Throne, And sitting. But and I loved seeing that. And I loved also with all the chapters what we had also in the Iron Islands, all these questions about it. And it was just really cool to see, because I feel like in this world, women have often been erased, like Rhaenyra, for example, has totally been erased. Like when you see the line of kings in Westeros, there's never, Rhaenyra doesn't appear, but and so it's just very interesting to see these things and how they're talking about, like in these chapters, specifically in Dorne and stuff. I really loved seeing that thought process of, why shouldn't we, like in Dorne we do it like this, why shouldn't it be everywhere like this?
Yeah, it's more of a matriarchy society based in Dorne, but even with that, I don't think that her father Doran Martell was super pleased about this plan. Probably won't do anything about it other than lay around and nurse his gout, but
Doran Martell.
So I really like when he is talking to her about some of the carefully laid plans over time that he has had, and how closely he worked with his brother and all that stuff. All that stuff, like, I remember being blown away the first time I read that, because I'm like, I didn't see any of this coming from this dude who's just kind of laying around and
Hanging out
feeble.
Dorne.
But no, I like all that. So I really enjoy the Dorne stuff a lot.
Yeah. Hey, it's always really cool to see like a new part of the world. I think George does a really good job of adding in, like a new portion of the world to you and seeing kind of all the events from an outside point of view. And so we get that in the Iron Islands, and we get it here probably even more so. And it's done so well. It's like some of my favorite parts of this book.
It's absolutely mind-blowing, honestly.
I love that Derry brings up Cyvass, which is a chess-like game that is referenced often. I love reading about the Cyvass throughout this book, and just the nerd in me, I guess. But no, I think that's all very cool. Marcella and what's the prince dude's name? I can't remember his name now. The two of them are playing together.
Tristan? Is that his name?
Tristan.
Tristan?
Yeah. Tristan.
Doubt the gout. Cool.
And his brother's like over trying to make an alliance with Dany, right?
Yeah, Quentin.
That's what he said.
Quentin, that's his name.
Yeah, so we'll see some Quentin stuff maybe in the next book. So
potentially.
Yeah, that goes. Where do we want to go to next? What is
Bravos, right?
Yeah, we can talk Bravos. That's
wow.
Yeah. Talk about Arya.
Yeah, Cat of the Canals. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, I just think her chapters are so interesting all the time, and I love since book one, which is insane because in book one this doesn't play a role yet, but how she has this identity theme throughout the entire book series. Sorry, and I just love seeing it, and especially when you have that interaction. I remember I was washing the dishes, and then you hear this is a Sam POV chapter. And he's talking to someone you just know because he's like, oh, this little girl with a super thin sword, and you're like, but no.
Yeah.
And I just love it so much. I love seeing Arya and learn how she's learning and how every time she's still in her head, no, I'm still Arya, but she's like, I'm no one, and how she's trying, but she still has that sense of identity.
Yeah.
And how sometimes she's like, no, that was Arya, and right now I'm Kat, and so.
I actually think one thing we haven't brought up, which is tied directly to this, is something that George does in this book, where he'll change. I actually love it. He changes the name of the character's point of view chapter to like how they identify in that moment.
Yeah.
So it could be like 2 Arya chapters, and one could be Arya, and one could be just another name that she's going by when she's like in Bravos. And he does that throughout this book. A number of times, and I love that.
And we'll continue to
something small. Yeah.
Yes, that kind of reminds me. I'll pivot off that in a minute, but I just want to say really quickly with the Arya chapters, I really appreciate his character voice with Arya and the way that she's observing Dorne and even approaching it with the statue that she's going underneath, and the way that she's seeing all those canals, and it's just absolutely incredibly rich. And at the same time, like it feels true and authentic to her perspective and what she's been through. And I think that like even just the scene, the Cat of the Canals specific chapter, when prior to when we know that that's what the identity she takes on, I think like, or I don't know when the timeline was for that now, but when Sam approaches her in his chapter, you just know without a doubt that's Arya. Like you don't even question it. His character voice is so strong. Like her voice is so strong. So I appreciate his writing of those chapters so much. One thing I want to say really quickly, though, it could be a pivot to a different discussion. So just as a side note, I love what you said. So both what Alex said and Joanna said. So Joanna, I think you're the one that really pointed out how identity is explored throughout this series. And Alex, you're pointing out the different names of the chapters. It's reminding me of Elaine. And one thing I wondered if you all noticed too, if it's okay for me to bring this up now, is how in Elaine's chapters, she's doing the same thing Arya is. She's saying that girl was who I was before. I'm no longer that girl. I'm not that Sansa girl. I'm Elaine. You know, she's totally doing the same thing, like trying to divorce herself from her previous identity as a Stark. And I just think it's really interesting to look at those two parallel journeys and how they're both doing the same things in different
Mm.
parts of the world and in different ways, in different contexts.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. I think it's fascinating.
Especially when you contrast that with book 1, where they were the lady and the I don't want to be a lady, and they were so different. And then now they're going through very different stories, yet through very different experiences in and of themselves. And I thought it was so fascinating because, correct me if I'm wrong, but in her chapters, she refers to Peter as her father, and you just like they're taking on these identities. It's not, oh yeah, Peter, but I'm pretending or something. Like, she thinks about him like that. And even the way she is with oh gosh, what's his face? Little Robert?
Robin?
No, Robin. There we go.
Robin.
Like, the way she is with him, you can tell she's learning. She's paid attention. She is no longer the spoiled little Sansa from the beginning.
Yeah.
And she's very compelling to me in these books, in this book specifically.
Really, really good. It continues on some of my favorite work in Storm with the stuff in the Vale. And she needs to be Elaine, because if she's not, her head's going to be swinging. So
Yeah.
she doesn't have any choice. She needs to be the natural daughter in this case. Going back to Arya for just a second, what I find most fascinating there is that she's learning what it means to be a member of the Faceless people, the House of the Undying. She's got this list of people she wants to kill. She's got reasons for murdering people, and none of that has any place in that world. What they do is they're assassins, and they get their money and they do what they're told to do. So I love that she's being disavowed of this notion that this is all for vengeance and making the world right, because that's not what it's supposed to be for. So I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It feels like almost like there's and it kind of goes back to that line I mentioned again in the prologue about the glass, but feels like a lot of our characters in this particular book are being humbled. And depending on how well they can be humbled, like let go of their past egos and take on, like let go of that agenda and take on the new role, the better that they can adapt to that, the better they can survive or play the game either way.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good point. Back to the Vale for just a moment. So Peter is making all these alliances and these deals, and he just proves yet again that he understands human nature, and he understands what motivates people, and he's going to use that against everybody, knowing exactly what they want and need. And I love all that stuff. It's so good with the Corbrays, whoever the other people were, the Royces and the other families, and making sure that they're allied with him, just to make sure that it all goes his way. I love it all.
Yeah. You can just tell who's very smart and clever at playing the game and who is still learning. And observing Peter Baelish is just, it's fascinating. It has been since day one, but I feel like now you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy is playing the long game.
Now that's in the open.
Yeah.
Like his intentions.
Like for me, I had to actually write out the whole entire scheme. He was explaining to Sansa. He's like, this person is a sibling to this person and this person. When he was trying to explain what he was doing, I was like, what are you doing? And then once I got it, I was like, whoa, that is so cool. It's kind of complicated, but I loved the way he never talked down to Sansa and the way that he basically was teaching her.
And that's, again, the good contrast to Cersei, who's not at all thinking about any of this stuff. She's only thinking about herself, about how she wanted to be the heir to Tywin, and she wanted to be the king, and she wanted to be the boy that's like, why did all the power and all the glory always go to Jamie, because she was just as much. And this is what she's about. And Peter is really like planning, scheming, doing all this stuff, and it's just so fascinating seeing these two characters who are so obsessed with power go about it in a totally different way, and seeing the end result of, seeing the intermediate result, of what they're planning in each of their little heads. So
it's interesting though, because Elaine, her identity isn't so far removed from Sansa. Like Elaine seems like the good girl, the good daughter, just not the princess that Sansa wanted to be.
Yeah.
But it's the easiest role for her to embody. And the same thing with Arya and Cat of the Canals. It's not so different than Arya, but she does have to let go of her agendas. She has to let go of some of her ego too.
Sure.
So I think that's really interesting to look at those two side by side. But that's really a good point though about her contrast to Cersei. Because Cersei uses her sexuality, she uses poison, she uses her mothering skills in order to get power. Whereas Elaine, Sansa, is learning how to take on this different identity, lie the right way, stay under the radar, not try to make herself a big player in a way. So using more subtle moves.
Yep.
Just like a little side note, like you were mentioning, this came to my mind as you were talking about Cersei. How is Qyburn not a red flag to her? Like, I don't get it. This guy, if he approaches you like, no, you get away because you are crazy. You're only gonna bring me problems. She's like, this is my new guy. Like, what? How can you think about?
He piques her curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a certain kind of person that gets thrown out of the Citadel for being evil. That's basically
my guy. Perfect.
Yeah, pick him out of the lineup. That's a good idea.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was like, girl, come on.
You know what I also love though? It's fun because we just talk about one character and it makes me think about another character with so I'm thinking now about Jamie and who is that executioner guy?
Oh yeah, Sir Ellen Payne.
Yeah, Ellen Payne.
And Ellen Payne. I'm the worst with names. I'm sorry.
You're good.
But I just think it's funny how much he's trusting him. And I guess it makes sense, but I just get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I love that he picks Ellen Payne because he can't read or write, and he obviously can't talk.
Yeah.
So apparently he's the perfect confessor.
Yes.
Just tell anything to. They're sword fighting, and he's talking about sleeping with Cersei and stuff. Like, it's so funny.
But he's still scary though. Like there's that scene where the prostitute woman comes up and tries to give him a kiss, and then she sees the look in his eyes and she backs off. I laughed at that.
Speaking of families not being very similar, Ellen Payne and Podrick Payne, not that similar.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah. I think uncle and nephew, right? Is that what it is? Or cousins? I can't remember which.
Yeah, something like that. I love how he's always, what is he always saying, sir, my lady, or something, whatever.
Sure, my lady, yeah.
It's so cute. I love their interactions, him and Brienne, yeah.
I love them too.
They're perfect together. It's good.
I was also going to ask you all too, like speaking of this identity theme and just switching, even Sam has to let go of being so self-deprecating. He can't put himself down on Jon's orders. And he learns to he learns a different side to himself in this story. What did you all think of Sam?
I love Sam.
I love Sam.
Yeah. He's just one of my favorite characters in fiction, not just Song of Ice and Fire. So I could always read Sam on the page. He's my boy.
I love the scene when he's with Gilly and he's like, but I'm a man of the Night's Watch. I said my vows. I can't be with you. And it's kind of like, well, you're changing too. Your identity is also changing. So
yeah. And then you find out that Gilly's son is not Mance Rayder's son.
What did you all think of that?
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
I for some reason I totally forgot that.
They didn't do this in the show, did they?
I don't think so.
No, because for me it was a big surprise. I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah,
no, I don't think that's a part of the show.
Yeah, and it's a little bit sad to see Sam come to grips with the fact that that's Jon's decision. And he's not really Jon anymore. He's the Lord Commander.
He's the Lord Commander
and he's making decisions for the Watch and not maybe decisions he would have made as just Jon. So. And
you see, this is what I love about the series, because you have a character that everyone thinks is the paragon of good, or just like a really good guy, like Jon Snow. Come on, and then he makes this decision. You're like, okay, yeah, I love it. No, but this is why I love this series so much.
Yeah.
But Sam is just the best. So yeah.
I know, and maybe this is due to events in book 5. I'm not sure, but I remember when I read the book. Sorry if there's noise in the background, by the way. I remember when I read the books the first time. I remember the people that I knew who read the books, of course, outside of this community. Jon Snow was not a popular character. I knew a lot of people who did not like him very much. Okay. I can't remember if it was due to events in book 5, but I also wonder about that decision and how if that rubs people the wrong way that he did that.
Definitely could.
Yeah.
I've always loved Jon, so I've had my bias in that direction. But
yeah. Well, for me, I feel like George makes it really clear how conflicted Jon is and how much he wants to make the right decision.
Yeah.
I think that's why I always sympathize with him.
Yeah.
And we do actually get a little bit of Jon in this book, which is nice, but
Yeah.
it's very, very
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
very brief.
Brief glimpse.
Take care, Raph. Thanks for dropping by, man. Appreciate it.
Raph.
Rogue's comment here is super funny. If you can't trust a man,
Yeah.
right, and talk, who can you trust? I like that a lot.
In this world, nobody. So
That's the pinnacle of trust right there.
yeah.
That is so funny. I love Bill Payne. He's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we touched on it earlier, but I love how George interweaves storylines and like plot lines together, even in the most briefest way. Like we were talking about, oh, we know that that's Arya just by the character voice.
Yeah.
And, you know, with Brienne and like characters, Brotherhood Without Banners that we saw in the previous, and then obviously Catelyn.
Yes.
And all that stuff. It's just how he weaves everything together so seamlessly it's so well done. So even in a book that is half of the POVs that we normally get, you're still getting so much breadth in terms of the story and the characters that you're seeing.
What do we think of Lady Stoneheart / zombie Catelyn? What's the
Scary.
prevailing thoughts there?
Sheesh.
I mean, I think she's an awesome character.
Yeah.
I'd be like here for it.
But the narrator, like Roy, he really gives her like this creepy voice, and you're like,
oh yeah.
Okay, I'm scared.
I'll have to listen to that. I haven't listened to the audio. Yeah.
This is really like, I don't know. You have to listen to it. I cannot do it, but it's just really
Go.
cool.
Oh man.
No, I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. But I thought it was so. Wow, like this is promising. I hope this goes in a really cool direction, and I wonder what's gonna happen with this, because this is clearly something that the show didn't do, and
Right.
so what would happen when her daughters see her again, or her sons, and she's like this,
Yeah, there has to be a reason for it, and it's I feel like George never does anything without some type of reason,
and
Yeah.
specifically
even if it's like
when it comes to magical stuff, because
Yeah.
he's pretty sparse about it. So
yep,
Exactly.
he's doing
not
this. There's a
something
reason
here.
for it.
Yeah, because it's like outside of that, and I mean that might be the only magical thing in this book, to be honest. Like A Feast for Crows is probably the least magic book, maybe.
A little bit of
There's no
references
dragons.
and stuff at the Citadel, but beyond that, like some of the stuff
Yeah,
we're talking about with the, the dragon glass and obsidian and stuff. But
And doesn't he in this book specifically mention the giant wolf pack like what feels like 20 times? Maybe it's me.
maybe
I don't.
'Cause I feel like
what
they talk
what
about-
part?
I don't know. I feel like I've heard so many times that, and there's a giant wolf pack somewhere killing all these things, and I'm like, Nymeria, and like, so or is this me? Did I
No,
dream
I
this?
think
No,
I think
that's
you're
not
right, but I
familiar.
think that's Storm.
Okay.
I don't think that's Feast. I could be wrong. I
In
think
that feast?
I think it's in Storm that you're
Oh
talking.
wow.
I could be
I
wrong.
mean, I don't know. But I do love how he mentions these things like, oh, by the way, it's like what you were saying, that he never does anything without a reason. And so Lady Stoneheart, the Pack of Wolves, all these things, you're like, oof. When this comes into play, I'm sure this is going to be
we
very,
hope
very interesting.
we remain hopeful.
It was sad not to get Stoneheart in the show. I
Yeah.
do remember that.
Yeah, that's just one thing I think that they one of the
So-
many. It's the desire not to make it as magical as they could.
Right.
Mm.
So Ben is confirming here, Joanna.
Okay.
So I didn't read it carefully enough. It seems I'll have to go back.
Thank you. But maybe because I look for this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
I look for these like silly things that nobody like. How many times did they mention that Cersei's eyes are green? And I'm like, oh, a lot. And because I'm looking for it, I notice it probably more than if you're not
Sure.
looking out for it. Yeah.
Makes sense.
What about the last Arya line in this book when she goes blind and it
Oh,
like cuts out near as her punishment? She's like, and she couldn't see anything. All she saw was darkness or something like that, and it
Wait,
just ends the
is she in
chapter.
the
And
next
that's
book? Maybe you should type it in the private chat. Wait, is there
We'll get there.
going to be no Arya chat? Oh gosh, okay.
as
I
far
can't
as Feast for
remember, to be
Crows
fair.
goes-
Lovely.
As far as A Feast for Crows goes, that's all she
Yeah.
wrote for Arya at that point.
Whew, okay.
I honestly don't. It's been a while. I don't remember, but if there is any, it is very, very minimal. Maybe one
Okay.
chapter, anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm probably 100% wrong and talking out of my butt, but I don't remember her being a big part of Dan Sif at all.
Ooh. Wow. So wait,
Johanna
that's the
Danny.
last we get of, or like almost the last we get of art. That's so sad.
We'll find out.
Wins. We need
Now,
wins.
now I'm
You
gonna have
do.
to look back at the chapter.
Yeah.
I'm telling
Doesn't
you,
know
this
when I'm
whole
gonna
this whole reread's just gonna make everyone want wins again.
Want wins more? Mm.
Than we heard.
Yeah.
I
Never
wanted to bring
stop.
something up if that's okay. And that is the very last lines of the book where the maesters are like, who do you think killed the dragons in the first place? And you're like, the Maester conspiracy is real. Like these guys, like, and especially with going back to the faith militant and everything, you just see that the religion here is like really, like the fantasy, the magic is toned down, and the religion is like this. And it was so interesting to see when they're like, this world is not a world for dragons and glass candles and that kind of stuff. We don't want that. And it makes you question so many things. Like,
Sure.
Even the fact that Fire and Blood is written by a maester, you're like, but how much can we trust this?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And yeah, I feel like it makes you analyze some scenes very differently. That things that happened to Targaryens as well, and like who was there to, for example, like a Council of 101, who was counting the votes? The Maesters. Who announced the votes? The Maesters. And it's just like, oh, there's so much. This is so cool. So yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you
there's a
think
line
of?
here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh no, I was gonna continue off of. You go.
No,
I
I
will
was
probably
gonna
change
say-
it.
I was just going to say they also talk about letting Maester Aemon rot on the wall, as
Yeah.
that's talked about in that same passage you're talking about. So.
Yes, that made me sad. Poor Mr. Aemon.
Yeah. Maester Aemon. Go ahead.
You were talking about like the very end of the book, and I was gonna bring up what you think of the epilogue, the whole like last section where Sam meets someone named Pate who was killed in the prologue. And you're just like, wait.
Yep.
Very cool cyclical thing there.
Mhm.
I guess that so I learned a few things about that. So I guess that was Jack Carr, right? Or that's a theory.
The big theory, yeah, that Jake and Hagar takes part in the prologue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
But every theory involves Jake and Hagar somehow, it feels
Yep.
like.
I know,
Yep.
like the Arya's dance master is Jake and Hagar.
Yeah.
Good question, Ben. Alex, what was happening there? No, I'm
I'm
just kidding.
confused.
Honestly, I was just like, I was confused again. I was confused as well. But yeah, basically Sam shows up with the dudes. He's trained to be an apprentice. The one guy goes to look for Danny, I'm pretty sure. And then Sam meets another apprentice named Pate, who introduced himself as Pate.
Mhm.
And that's when I was like, the name's very familiar. And I skimmed back at the prologue and was like, that's the same guy from the prologue. Or it's the same name and it's not the same guy.
Right.
Never explained. I don't know.
We do know that Pate is a name that's used in the world because I think it's
Yeah.
Tommen's whipping boy maybe is also a Pate. So I think
Mhm.
it's and I could be completely wrong, but that's what I'm remembering. So it's possible that this is just like Jim in their world. Who knows?
Jim.
So I noticed something
Bob
in
Smith.
that that last page when I was reading the book, and then I was informed more things on the podcast than the podcast, and the thing I noticed was how the character Alaris, by some called the Sphinx.
Yep.
Obviously, there's some connection there to what Aemon is saying when he's dying.
Right. Yep.
About the Sphinx. And then the other thing I noticed though is that he had the skin, the color, well, it says here, he had the skin, the color of light brown ale, and a cap of black curls, of tight black curls that came to a widow's peak above his big black eyes. And I noticed I'd read about a widow's peak earlier in the book. And since I was reading the ebook, I was able to search this and pull all this up. And I found out that like there is a section in Dorne when Ariane is talking about coming up like some kind of dream or some kind of meeting with the guy with the widow's peak. And so I figured it was the same person. And then the other thing, but the thing that they revealed to me is that Alaris is actually backwards. It's Solaris. I have to find the name again. Yeah, Solera. So they think it's the same character who is Solera in Dorne.
I don't remember who Solera is in Dorne. Which is not to say that's not important. I just don't remember.
I'll look it up. But it is brought up in that Dorne chapter as well, in that same section that I was
Ooh,
telling
this
you
is
about.
interesting.
Yeah, I never.
Yeah, there's some
I
weird
never
stuff.
would have tied that together. That's pretty cool.
See, this is why rereading.
Some deep analysis.
Yeah.
Sorella.
I
Sorry,
read
Sorella.
reread stuff a million times and still don't
I'm saying
catch
it wrong.
Yeah, I know on the Bend the Knee they were reading like a chapter at a time and analyzing chapter at a time. And I can't even imagine how much you would unpack with these books. There's just so much loaded in these.
Aren't they at the Storm? Are they at the Feast for Crows or are they at the Storm of Swords?
They're at a Storm of Swords.
Yeah.
Storm.
And honestly, I was supposed to talk about a Storm of Swords with them, and then that day I had finished a Feast for Crows, and so I was on this whole Feast for Crows thing, and they were like, "Let's do that." I'm like, "Okay," so we just started talking about a Feast for Crows. But so, yeah, it says here that Solera. I just looked it up in my ebook.
Oh, yeah, Derry just said it's
one of the sand snakes.
One of sand
snakes.
Yeah,
one of the sand snakes. What if Solera? She's a woman grown almost 20, and let's see.
I get the sand snake mixed up. I remember like Tyene and maybe one other one, Obara. I remember, but
Obara.
For some reason I don't remember Solera.
So it looks like she's not present in Dorne right now. It says here that unless she returns to Dorne, there's naught I can do about Solera, save pray that she shows more sense than her sisters. Leave her to her game. So I don't know. Leave her to her game, and then it's interesting that if she
it sounds purpose deliberate.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do they?
And then the Widow's Peak part, I'll find that too.
I'm trying to remember if females are admitted to the Citadel or not, or is she perhaps masking her gender if she's at the Citadel? I don't know.
She could be. It's a theme.
I don't know.
Throughout this.
Yeah.
And the rogue said, didn't Gerb subtly confirm a familial connection in this book? But which one in particular are you talking?
I found it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
So I found it. There's a chapter. So in Dorne, it's the character Aleras. So Solera backwards. And it says here, wait, is that the character at the end? Now I'm confused.
Aleras is the Sphinx that's in the prologue.
Oh, that is the Sphinx.
Yeah.
Never mind. Okay, that's the Widow's Peak. That was mentioned in the prologue. I'm at the wrong place. I'm sorry.
No, okay.
Yeah. I found it. Sorry. Okay. So it says here, this is in Ariane's point of view. And she says here in italics, it says, I sat beside the well and pretended that some robber knight had brought me here to have his way with me. She thought, a tall, hard man with black eyes and a widow's peak.
Okay.
But it also says with the soul, so I don't know. And I don't know if that's really the same as Solera, but I guess that's a theory. Just interesting to see that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Derry has confirmed no girls in the Citadel. That's what I thought.
So she could be masking as her gender for sure.
Okay. Cool. All right. Where to from here? What else does anybody want to talk about, or who else does anybody want to talk about? Maybe favorite scene. What does everybody have as their, if you had to pick one scene out of the thing, what would it be that sticks with you?
I don't know.
Too hard, probably, to pick.
I think emotion-wise, Mr. Aemon dying, that was really sad.
That's good.
Scene where I was like, yes, the one with Jamie when he takes the letter from Cersei and just throws it away. And I was like,
I was gonna say Jamie at the at River Run.
Yeah,
that whole
I love those scenes.
Situation.
Yeah,
those are great scenes.
I would say
him playing Reigns
Blackfish
for Edmure. That resonates for me. I like that a lot.
That's wild.
This book definitely it adds a lot. Like we touched on it, but it adds so much lore. I think there's a lot of just world building. I think that's done in this book that we just didn't get because there's just so much actually happening in with all the characters and plot and stuff and Storm of Swords and before that this book, because it was slowed down and it's kind of zoomed in on some characters, then you start learning way more about prophecies and history and like events. Even if they're not explained, you're just they're brought up continuously. So I like seeing all of that.
See, I like that kind of stuff as a reader, but I'm kind of a boring reader. I'm boring when it comes to the things I love. But I can understand why people would struggle with this one compared to A Storm of Swords, because like we were
Oh
saying
yeah.
in the Storm of Swords talk, there are so many climaxes.
Yep.
Like I came up with what 20, and I forgot Danny's chapters. Like it's
Yeah.
just insane. And
Yeah.
with this particular book, there were some climactic moments. I feel like with the Brotherhood stuff, or not the Brotherhood, the Sparrows,
Mm.
the priest.
Brotherhood without banners.
Yeah, I think is that what they're called? Now I'm drawing a blank.
Cersei's downfall was pretty climactic. Like that
Yes.
whole sequence.
I mean,
is pretty...
Cersei's whole downfall is pretty. I think yes, actually, that would be my scene. Is a scene where she is taken prisoner.
Yeah, I mean that's
wild to me. I just when she's trying to run away, and oh my goodness, that whole entire thing, and she's humbled and thrown into like and torn of her clothes, and I don't know, it's just wild.
I love what the rogue says here about Brienne being a descendant of Duncan the Tall, and obviously he's one of the two characters in Duncan Egg. So, with one of the Aegons being the other one. So read Duncan Egg. That's my mission for everyone.
But I also agree too. I loved the scene with Brendan Tully, and I also loved the scene when Maester Aemon is dying, and I also loved the Brienne the Beauty. That line just got me so happy all over again.
Poor Brienne. Not a fun ending for her.
Yeah.
Sad.
What do you guys think? Actually, theorizing, do you guys think the Hound is actually dead?
I mean, it's probably one of the most confirmed, unconfirmed rumors there are that he shows up in this book, right?
Yeah, I think he's without a doubt still alive, but
he's the
everyone keeps saying he's dead.
Grave digger or whatnot is the assumption, and I guess I've just always assumed that to be the case.
What is the giveaway of that? Because I did notice the grave digger, and I knew he was supposed to be somebody we knew, but I didn't really get exactly what it was that was confirming he was the Hound.
I think probably just the sheer size and ferocity, and
because I would have expected him to have burned face, right?
Yeah, the amount of time we've waited for wins definitely helps people solidify the series.
I need to go back and read it. I'll be honest about that. I always kind of just skim over that because I'm like, oh yeah, stuff. But
yeah, I mean it makes sense, but
I do think he's still alive. I don't think that he was left dying and off the page.
No,
I don't think he would.
Not in George's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Derry, because of his horse. I knew it. I mean, I recognized his horse. I did recognize that. I was like, oh yeah, is it Stranger? I can't remember the horse. No, that's not the name.
I think it is.
I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I did recognize the horse, and I did know that was the Hound's horse. I just didn't put it together that was the Hound. But it does make sense because the last they see him is in a grave, right? Or they keep talking about how they dug him a grave, and he's a grave digger. So it's kind of fitting.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, any other last minute things we want to talk about, or anything we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I have a question. What do you all think about Taena? Taena?
Oh, like Cersei's bed friend. I don't know how to say this. Pillow friend. There we go.
Yeah.
What do you think her motivations are? Do you think Cersei was right to trust her?
No.
I think it'd be trustworthy to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the irony would be that the one person Cersei trusts ends up being the person that she shouldn't trust.
Totally. Like, so Shakespearean. Yeah.
She's so obsessed with she like can't trust anyone, and then the one person that she lets in ends up being the one that, or one of them, someone that she shouldn't have let in to begin with. So that would fit.
I don't think she should be trusting this woman. No.
And then the fact that she sends Loras away to Dragonstone.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, that definitely upset the balance of power too. Laura getting all beat up, and not in good shape and coming back, and Marjorie not being happy about any of that, obviously. So
I love the Tyrells too, I have to say. Every time they were on the page, like Olenna, when she's talking to Cersei and like making it so obvious, like just little jabs of like, the father.
Oh,
like
yeah.
hinting at she knows that, Tommen, that
Yep.
Robert was not the true father. Just got a kick out of all those scenes.
Yeah, she's awesome.
To Rogue's question, that is correct. That was the original plan, was that Feast was going to take place 5 years after A Storm of Swords.
Wow.
That obviously didn't happen because of everything else that happened, but that was the original idea.
Okay.
Such an amazing series. This is such a great series,
It is
guys.
such a good
I
series.
know.
Speaking of which, when are we all reading and talking about Dance? Have we decided?
That's a good question.
Oh goodness. I think for me it's gonna probably have to be at the end of August.
Okay.
I was
Too
going to
tall.
jokingly say September, but okay, you're not
We
joking.
can say early September. September might
What about
actually
There's no
Halloween?
hurry. That's fine.
Anyone?
You guys want to do August or September? That's fine.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
because I'm going to be out of the country late July into early August, so for 2 weeks. So I'm
out of town.
hoping to read some of it during that time, but just to be on the safe side, I think maybe end of August.
Don't schedule around that. Take your vacation and have a good time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I couldn't do beginning of September, so just so you know, that's the first 2 weeks. But other than that.
Oh, okay. We can plan after that. I mean, as long as you guys are okay, if we take our time, or I don't know.
Totally.
I don't know what the hurry is. It's fine.
Yeah.
I find
It's
I
more time to
enjoy
read it anyway.
Yeah, and I find
It's
I
still-
just enjoy the reading experience more when I take my time. Maybe read multiple books. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
And
just
it's
don't
also
want to
this
read it and then the discussion
dances-
2 months later and I have to reread it again.
Yeah. I'll read it closer to when we
I'm
talk.
definitely going to read it closer. Dance is also just as long as Storm, so I think
It is long.
It's okay to
That's correct.
yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic.
It's good.
I didn't know that was the actress's name, but the actress that portrayed
She's so good. Yeah,
was incredible. Show.
Nails it.
Mm.
I love her. Yay! Thank you, Derry.
All right. Well,
Who's going to be in your live show again next week? Or
thanks for bringing that up. So same time, I think, same place. Be Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. He's read this a few times. It will be Madison Goodyear. I think she completed her reread. She was working on it. I think she'll be ready. Books with Bingus Khan, who's in the chat with us here. So Ben, excited to chat with you, my friend. And Kyle from Read by Kyle are the folks who be joining me.
Yeah.
And we don't have super specifics, but we're going to focus primarily on the Dorne plot line and on the Iron Isles plot line. So just sort of looking at it and focus on those two key areas.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that
Excited
too.
for that one.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll probably wrap it up here. I know Joanna has to get going pretty soon anyhow, but I appreciate everybody that was here in the chat. I especially appreciate my guests. You guys are the best. So thanks so much for coming. And as always, publication order always, my friends.
Yes. See you, everyone.
Thank you.